Sarah Martinez had never believed in prophecies. At 42, she was a woman of science, a registered nurse who dealt in facts, medications, and measurable outcomes. But that Tuesday morning in downtown Phoenix, something inexplicable was about to shatter her rational world. She had just finished her night shift at St. Joseph's Hospital, exhausted from 12 hours of caring for critically ill patients. The Arizona sun was already blazing at 7 a.m. as she walked toward the crosswalk on Central Avenue, her scrub still carrying the antiseptic smell of the ICU. That's when she saw him, an elderly man with kind eyes standing near the bus stop. He wasn't particularly remarkable, wearing a simple brown jacket despite the heat, but something about his presence made her pause. As she approached the intersection, he stepped forward. "Excuse me, miss," he said softly, his voice carrying an unusual warmth. "I know this might sound strange, but I feel compelled to tell you something." Sarah glanced at her watch, eager to get home, but something in his demeanor made her stop. "Today, the hand you cannot see will hold you," he said with quiet certainty. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Remember these words when the moment comes." Before Sarah could respond or ask what he meant, the pedestrian signal changed to green. She shook her head, dismissing the encounter as the ramblings of an eccentric stranger, and stepped into the crosswalk. Behind her, she could hear the rumble of morning traffic building as the city awakened. If you've ever experienced something that defied explanation, something that made you question everything you thought you knew about how the world works, hit that subscribe button and stay with me for this incredible journey. The crosswalk on Central Avenue was like thousands of others. White painted lines on weathered asphalt, flanked by the usual urban chaos of honking cars and hurried pedestrians. Sarah had crossed this same intersection hundreds of times during her 3 years working at St. Joseph's. It was routine, mundane, forgettable. But as she stepped off the curb that morning, the stranger's words echoed in her mind. "The hand you cannot see will hold you." What did that even mean? Sarah prided herself on being logical, practical. She'd seen too much real suffering in the hospital to believe in mystical interventions or divine protection. Her phone buzzed with a text from her teenage daughter, Emma. "Mom, can you pick up groceries on your way home? We're out of everything." Sarah smiled despite her fatigue. Single motherhood meant her responsibilities never ended, even after a grueling night shift. She was halfway across the street, typing a quick response about stopping at the store, when she heard it, a sound that would haunt her dreams for months to come. The screech of tires losing their grip on asphalt, the desperate wail of brakes being pushed beyond their limits. Sarah looked up from her phone to see a massive 18-wheeler bearing down on the intersection. The driver's face was visible through the windshield, his eyes wide with terror as he fought to control the runaway truck. The traffic light was still red for his direction, but the massive vehicle showed no signs of stopping. Time seemed to slow as Sarah realized with crystal clarity that she was directly in the truck's path, with nowhere to run and no time to escape. What happened next defied every law of physics Sarah had learned in nursing school, every principle of momentum and mass that governed the rational world she inhabited. The 18-wheeler, weighing approximately 80,000 pounds and traveling at roughly 35 miles per hour, should have been unstoppable. Sarah stood frozen in the middle of Central Avenue, her phone still clutched in her hand, watching death approach in the form of chrome and steel. The truck's horn blared a final, desperate warning. She could see the panic in the driver's eyes, could read the company name painted on the cab, Desert Freight Lines. In that split second, Sarah's mind processed impossible calculations. The truck was maybe 30 feet away when she first noticed it. At its speed, she had perhaps 2 seconds to live. There was no time to run, no space to dodge, no miracle of human reflexes that could save her. The mathematical certainty of her death was absolute. But then, something extraordinary occurred. The massive truck, which had been barreling forward with unstoppable momentum, began to decelerate at a rate that should have been physically impossible. Not gradually, not with the long stopping distance that physics demanded, but with an abrupt precision that made no sense. The screech of brakes became deafening, drowning out the sounds of the city. Smoke poured from the truck's tires as they fought against an invisible force. Sarah watched in stunned disbelief as the enormous vehicle came to a complete stop exactly 18 inches from where she stood. 18 inches. Close enough that she could touch the warm metal of the bumper, close enough to smell the burned rubber and heated brake pads, close enough to see her own reflection in the chrome. The silence that followed was profound and sacred. For several heartbeats, the world stood still. Sarah stared at the massive truck bumper inches from her body, her mind struggling to process what had just occurred. The truck's engine idled with a low rumble, and she could hear the tick-tick-tick of cooling metal. Around her, the intersection had erupted into chaos. Car doors slammed as drivers emerged to witness the scene. Someone was shouting, "Call 911!" Another voice cried, "Did you see that? That truck just stopped like it hit a wall." The driver's door opened with a metallic groan, and a middle-aged man in a flannel shirt climbed down from the cab. His face was pale as paper, his hands shaking visibly. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice cracking, "are you hurt? I don't understand what happened. My brakes failed coming down the hill and then—" He gestured helplessly at his truck. Sarah found her voice, though it sounded strange and distant to her own ears. "I'm okay," she managed. "I'm fine." But even as she spoke the words, she knew that nothing would ever be fine in the same way again. A crowd was gathering now. A businessman in an expensive suit was recording everything with his phone. A woman with a baby stroller kept repeating, "It's a miracle! It's a miracle!" An elderly Hispanic man crossed himself and whispered prayers in Spanish. But Sarah's attention was drawn to the edge of the crowd, where the stranger from the bus stop stood watching with those same kind eyes. He nodded once, as if to say, "Now you understand," then turned and walked away, disappearing into the maze of downtown Phoenix before she could call out to him. Within minutes, Central Avenue was flooded with emergency vehicles. Phoenix police officers directed traffic around the scene, while paramedics insisted on checking Sarah's vital signs, despite her protests that she was unharmed. The truck driver, whose name was Mike Gonzalez, sat on the curb with his head in his hands, giving his statement to a traffic investigator. 23 years I've been driving," Mike told Officer Rodriguez. "Never had an accident, never had brake failure. I was coming down Central from the overpass when the pedal went to the floor. Nothing. No brakes at all." He looked up at the investigator with bewildered eyes. "But then, right when I thought I was going to kill that lady, it was like something grabbed my truck and just stopped it." Officer Rodriguez had seen plenty of accidents in his 15-year career, but this one puzzled him. He walked around the truck, examining the brake system, the tire marks on the asphalt, the precise point where the massive vehicle had come to rest. The physics didn't add up. "The skid marks show you were doing at least 35 when you started braking," he told Mike. "At that speed, with full brake failure, this truck should have traveled another 200 feet minimum before stopping, but you stopped in about 50 feet. He shook his head. "I've never seen anything like it." A tow truck arrived to examine the disabled 18-wheeler, and the mechanic confirmed what everyone already knew but couldn't explain. "Brake lines completely severed," he announced. "This truck had no stopping power at all. How it managed to stop like that?" He shrugged, unable to finish the sentence. Sarah watched the investigation unfold from the sidewalk, still clutching her phone, still trying to make sense of what had happened to her. Back at her apartment that evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. She had called in sick to work, something she rarely did, because she couldn't shake the events of the morning. Her daughter Emma was at school, giving Sarah time to process what had happened in solitude. She had always been the rational one in her family. When her mother talked about guardian angels and divine intervention, Sarah would smile politely and change the subject. When her sister claimed that prayer had helped her through her divorce, Sarah attributed the healing to therapy and time. Faith was fine for other people, but Sarah believed in science, in cause and effect, in explanations that could be measured and verified. But how could science explain what she had witnessed? She pulled out her laptop and began researching truck stopping distances, brake failure statistics, anything that might provide a logical explanation for the morning's events. The math was unforgiving. An 80,000-pound truck traveling at 35 miles per hour with complete brake failure simply could not stop in 50 feet. It was physically impossible. She found herself thinking about the stranger's words. "Today, the hand you cannot see will hold you." Had he somehow known what was going to happen? Was it possible that some force beyond her understanding had intervened to save her life? Sarah shook her head, frustrated with herself for even entertaining such thoughts. There had to be a rational explanation. Maybe the truck's weight distribution was unusual. Maybe there was some mechanical factor she didn't understand. Maybe the pavement conditions created unexpected friction. But even as she grasped for scientific explanations, a small voice in her heart whispered that she had experienced something far beyond the reach of human understanding. The next morning, Sarah couldn't resist returning to the intersection. She told herself she was just curious, that she wanted to see the scene in daylight, but deep down she was searching for answers that continued to elude her rational mind. The crosswalk looked ordinary again. Traffic flowed normally, and pedestrians crossed without a second thought. But when Sarah approached the exact spot where the truck had stopped, she noticed something that made her pause. There, etched into the asphalt, were the deepest tire marks she had ever seen, as if the truck's wheels had been pressed into the pavement with impossible force. "You're the lady from yesterday, aren't you?" Sarah turned to find a young man in his 20s approaching her. He wore a coffee shop apron and carried himself with the nervous energy of someone bursting to share an incredible story. "I'm Jake," he said, extending his hand. "I work at the Starbucks right there." He pointed to the corner building. "I saw the whole thing through the window. I've been telling everyone about it, but nobody believes me." Sarah shook his hand, curious despite herself. "What did you see?" Jake's eyes lit up with the fervor of someone who had witnessed the impossible. "That truck was flying, lady. I mean, really moving fast. And when it got to where you were standing, it didn't just brake. It stopped like it hit an invisible wall. But here's the weird part." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Just before it stopped, I swear I saw something." "What did you see?" "It sounds crazy, but for just a split second, there was like a shimmer in the air, like heat waves, but different, like something was there that I couldn't quite see." Jake's account haunted Sarah throughout the day. That evening, she found herself doing something that would have seemed ridiculous just 48 hours earlier. She was researching angel sightings and miraculous interventions online. The rational part of her mind protested, but she couldn't stop herself from reading story after story of impossible rescues and divine protection. The next morning, she made a decision that surprised even her. She walked into the Phoenix Police Department and asked to speak with Officer Rodriguez, the investigator who had worked her case. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, recognizing her immediately. "How are you feeling? Any delayed shock or trauma from the incident?" "I'm fine physically," Sarah replied. "But I was wondering, did you ever find any security camera footage of what happened?" Officer Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, his expression growing thoughtful. "Funny you should ask. We pulled footage from 3 different cameras, the traffic cam at the intersection, the security camera from the bank on the corner, and the one from that coffee shop. And, well, that's where it gets interesting." He pulled out a file folder and opened it on his desk. All 3 cameras show the truck approaching the intersection at high speed. They show you in the crosswalk. But then, right at the moment of impact, he paused as if struggling with how to phrase what came next. What happened? The footage gets strange. There's this bright flash, not like sunlight or a reflection, but something else. And in that flash, the truck just stops. Our tech guys have analyzed it frame by frame. They can't explain the light source, and they can't explain how a vehicle moving that fast could decelerate so quickly. Officer Rodriguez closed the folder and looked directly at Sarah. "Off the record? In 23 years of police work, I've never seen anything like it." Obsessed now with finding answers, Sarah returned to the bus stop where she had first encountered the mysterious stranger. She arrived at the same time as their original meeting, 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, hoping against hope that he might appear again. The bus stop was busy with commuters heading to work, but the elderly man in the brown jacket was nowhere to be seen. Sarah approached several regular commuters, describing the man who had spoken to her, but no one recognized him. The bus driver, a friendly woman named Rosa, had been working that route for 5 years. "Honey, I know all my regulars," Rosa said when Sarah described the stranger, "and I've never seen anyone matching that description. You sure it was at this stop?" Sarah was certain, but doubt began to creep in. Had she imagined the encounter? Had stress from her demanding job created a false memory? But no, she could still hear his voice clearly. "Today, the hand you cannot see will hold you." She spent the next several days returning to the area at different times, asking shop owners and street vendors if they had seen the man. Her search led her to Maria's Taqueria, a small family restaurant 2 blocks from the intersection. The owner, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, listened carefully to Sarah's description. "Mija," Maria said softly, "I've been in this neighborhood for 30 years. I know everyone who comes and goes regularly, but sometimes—" She paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sometimes God sends messengers who aren't from around here, if you know what I mean." Sarah stared at her, unsure how to respond. "You think he was—" "I think you experienced something holy," Maria said simply. "And maybe you're not supposed to find him again. Maybe you're supposed to find something else instead." Word of Sarah's miraculous escape began to spread through Phoenix in ways she never expected. Jake from the coffee shop had posted his eyewitness account on social media, and the story was being shared hundreds of times. Local news stations started calling, wanting to interview the miracle woman of Central Avenue. Sarah initially refused all media requests. She was a private person, uncomfortable with attention, and still struggling to understand what had happened to her. But when Channel 12 News ran the story anyway, using traffic camera footage and interviews with other witnesses, she realized her life had changed whether she wanted it to or not. The response was overwhelming. Her phone rang constantly with calls from strangers wanting to share their own stories of divine intervention. Letters arrived at the hospital where she worked, addressed simply to the nurse who was saved by God. People began showing up at the intersection, some to pray, others just to see the place where the impossible had occurred. Among the letters was one that particularly moved her. It was from a woman named Patricia, whose husband had been driving behind the truck that day. "Dear Sarah," the letter read, "my husband Carlos was in the car directly behind that truck. He saw everything. He came home that night and told me, 'Patricia, I saw the hand of God today.' Carlos isn't a religious man, he's an engineer, very practical. But he said what he witnessed changed something inside him. He wanted you to know that your miracle has strengthened the faith of people you've never even met." Sarah folded the letter carefully, beginning to understand that her experience was about more than just her own life. Something larger was at work, something that was touching hearts and opening minds throughout her community. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a physicist at Arizona State University, first heard about Sarah's story through a colleague who had seen the news coverage. As a woman of science who specialized in studying momentum and energy transfer, she was intrigued by the reports of an impossible truck stop. She reached out to Sarah through the hospital, explaining that she wanted to investigate the incident from a purely scientific perspective. "I'm not trying to debunk your experience," Dr. Chen explained during their first meeting. "I'm genuinely curious about what forces could have been at work that day." Together, they returned to the intersection with sophisticated measuring equipment. Dr. Chen analyzed the tire marks, calculated the truck's speed and weight, measured the stopping distance, and examined the road surface for any anomalies that might explain the rapid deceleration. Her findings were troubling, from a scientific standpoint. "Based on every principle of physics I know," she told Sarah, "what happened to you should have been impossible. The energy required to stop that truck so quickly would have had to come from somewhere, but I can't identify any source." Dr. Chen was particularly puzzled by the tire marks. These impressions in the asphalt suggest the truck was pressed downward with tremendous force at the moment of stopping. But there's no mechanism that could have created that kind of vertical pressure. As a scientist, Dr. Chen was trained to find rational explanations for observed phenomena. But as she stood in the intersection where Sarah had nearly died, she found herself confronting the limits of human understanding. "I've spent my entire career studying the laws that govern our physical universe," she said quietly. "But maybe there are other laws, higher laws, that we haven't discovered yet." Mike Gonzalez had been having nightmares since the accident, not about what had happened, but about what could have happened. In his dreams, he saw himself as a killer, the driver who had taken an innocent woman's life because his brakes had failed. He would wake up in cold sweats, reliving those terrible seconds when he realized his truck was out of control. His wife, Carmen, finally convinced him to seek counseling, but the therapist couldn't help him process an event that defied explanation. That's when Mike decided to reach out to Sarah directly. He needed to talk to the woman whose life had been spared, to try to make sense of what they had both experienced. They met at a quiet diner near the hospital where Sarah worked. Mike was a big man, with calloused hands and gentle eyes, and Sarah could see that the incident had shaken him profoundly. "I keep going over it in my mind," Mike told her, stirring sugar into his coffee with nervous energy. "I've been driving trucks for over 2 decades. I know exactly how they behave, how they stop, how they handle. What happened that day?" He shook his head. "It wasn't natural." Mike described the moment when his brakes failed, the growing panic as he realized he couldn't stop, the horror of seeing Sarah in his path. "But then, right at the end, it felt like something took control of my truck, like invisible hands grabbed it and just held it still. I felt it too," Sarah said softly. "Not physically, but something. A presence." Mike nodded emphatically. "Exactly. And you know what? I'm not the same man I was before that day. Carmen says I'm different, more thoughtful, more grateful. I used to take a lot for granted, but now," he gestured around the diner, at the ordinary people living their ordinary lives. "Now I see miracles everywhere." Emma Martinez was 17 years old and, like most teenagers, thought she knew everything about her mother. Sarah was practical, hardworking, and skeptical of anything that couldn't be proven scientifically. So when her mom started talking about divine intervention and mysterious strangers, Emma initially thought the stress of the near-death experience had affected her mother's judgment. "Mom, you're being weird," Emma said one evening, as Sarah recounted another phone call from someone wanting to share their own miracle story. "You've never believed in this stuff before. Remember when Grandma used to talk about her guardian angel, and you'd roll your eyes?" Sarah looked at her daughter, this beautiful, intelligent young woman who was her greatest achievement, and struggled to explain how profoundly the incident had changed her perspective. "Emma, I saw something that day. I experienced something that I can't explain away with logic or science. But you're a nurse, Mom. You deal with facts, with medicine, with things you can measure and test. This isn't like you." Sarah sat down beside her daughter on the couch, choosing her words carefully. "What if I told you that sometimes the most important truths can't be measured in a laboratory? What if there are forces in this universe that are bigger than our understanding?" Emma studied her mother's face, seeing something there she had never noticed before. A peace, a certainty that transcended rational explanation. "You really believe something supernatural saved you?" "I believe that I should be dead right now, and I'm not. I believe that truck should have killed me, and it didn't. I believe that sometimes, when we need it most, we receive help from sources we can't see or understand." Sarah took her daughter's hand. "And I believe that experience was meant to teach me something important about faith, about trust, about the mystery of being alive." 3 weeks after the incident, something unexpected began happening at the intersection of Central Avenue and 3rd Street. People started leaving flowers at the spot where Sarah had nearly died. Not elaborate bouquets, but simple offerings: a single rose, a handful of daisies, children's drawings of angels. Father Miguel from St. Mary's Catholic Church noticed the growing memorial during his morning walks. He had heard about the miraculous truck stop through his parishioners, many of whom were convinced they had witnessed a genuine miracle. The priest was a thoughtful man who had served his community for 15 years, and he recognized the signs of spiritual awakening when he saw them. He began stopping by the intersection each morning to pray quietly and to speak with the people who came to visit the site. There was Maria, the elderly woman who brought fresh flowers every Tuesday. There was James, a construction worker who credited Sarah's story with renewing his faith after years of doubt. There was little Sophia, age 7, who drew pictures of angels protecting people in crosswalks. "This place has become holy ground for our community," Father Miguel told Sarah when he finally met her. "Your experience has opened hearts that had been closed, has reminded people that we live in a world where miracles are possible." The intersection memorial grew organically, without organization or official sanction. The city initially planned to remove the flowers and drawings, but public sentiment was so strong that they decided to leave the tribute alone. Local businesses began referring to the area as Miracle Corner, and tourists started arriving to see the place where the impossible had occurred. Sarah found herself becoming an unofficial guardian of the site, stopping by regularly to maintain the memorial and to speak with visitors who wanted to hear her story firsthand. Not everyone believed in the miracle at Central Avenue. Dr. Marcus Webb, a prominent skeptic and professor of psychology at the University of Arizona, heard about Sarah's story through media coverage and decided to investigate what he was certain would prove to be a case of mass hysteria and selective perception. Dr. Webb was a man who had built his career on debunking claims of supernatural phenomena. He had written 3 books on the psychology of belief and had appeared on numerous television programs explaining how people could convince themselves they had witnessed miracles when natural explanations existed for every seemingly impossible event. He arranged to meet with Sarah, confident that he could help her understand the psychological factors that had led her to misinterpret a fortunate but perfectly natural occurrence. "Mrs. Martinez," he began during their interview, "trauma can affect memory and perception in remarkable ways. What you experienced was undoubtedly frightening, but that doesn't mean it was supernatural." Sarah listened patiently as Dr. Webb explained his theories about confirmation bias, the placebo effect, and the human tendency to find patterns and meaning in random events. He had reasonable explanations for everything. The truck's stopping distance could have been affected by factors she hadn't considered. The stranger at the bus stop was probably just a coincidence that her mind had connected to the accident after the fact. "I understand your need to find scientific explanations," Sarah replied when he finished. "I used to think exactly the way you do. But sometimes, Dr. Webb, the evidence of our own experience has to count for something. I know what I felt that day. I know what I saw. And I know that my life was saved by something beyond human understanding." Dr. Webb left their meeting more puzzled than he had expected to be. Sarah Martinez was clearly intelligent, rational, and psychologically stable. Her account was consistent and detailed. For the first time in his career, he found himself questioning his own certainty. If this story is challenging your own beliefs about what's possible in our world, I want you to leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced something that couldn't be explained? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Dr. Amanda Foster had been Sarah's colleague at St. Joseph's Hospital for 2 years, and she knew Sarah to be one of the most level-headed, scientifically minded nurses on staff. So when Sarah began talking about divine intervention and miraculous protection, Dr. Foster was concerned that the trauma of the near-death experience might have affected her mental state. As head of the hospital's psychiatric department, Dr. Foster was trained to recognize the signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, survivor's guilt, and other psychological conditions that could result from life-threatening incidents. She suggested that Sarah undergo a comprehensive evaluation to ensure she was processing the event in a healthy way. The results of the psychological assessment surprised everyone involved. Sarah showed no signs of trauma, delusion, or impaired judgment. Her cognitive function was excellent. Her memory of events was clear and consistent, and her emotional state was remarkably stable, even positive. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen someone respond to a near-death experience quite like this, Dr. Foster told her colleague, Dr. James Park. Usually, we see anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, or other stress responses. But Sarah seems transformed in a positive way. She's more peaceful, more purposeful, more connected to something larger than herself. Dr. Foster began documenting Sarah's case as a unique example of post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where individuals emerge from life-threatening experiences with enhanced psychological resilience and spiritual awareness. But even that clinical framework couldn't fully explain the profound change she observed in her colleague. "It's as if she's been given access to a different way of seeing the world," Dr. Foster noted in her case files. Whatever happened to her that day, it wasn't just a physical rescue. It was a spiritual awakening that has fundamentally altered her perspective on life, death, and the nature of reality itself. Carlos Mendoza was the engineer Patricia had written about in her letter to Sarah. As someone who spent his days working with precise calculations and measurable forces, he had been deeply disturbed by what he witnessed that Tuesday morning. Unable to let the matter rest, he decided to conduct his own investigation into the physics of the impossible truck stop. Working with traffic engineering data and vehicle specifications, Carlos created a detailed computer model of the incident. He input the truck's weight, speed, brake condition, road surface, weather conditions, and every other variable he could identify. No matter how he adjusted the parameters, his simulations showed the same result. The truck should have traveled at least 150 feet beyond the point where it actually stopped. "I ran the calculation dozens of times," Carlos told his wife Patricia over dinner. "I even consulted with colleagues at other engineering firms. Everyone agrees. What happened defies the laws of physics as we understand them." Carlos's obsession with solving the puzzle led him to examine the intersection in person. He measured the skid marks, analyzed the asphalt composition, and even interviewed the truck's manufacturer about the vehicle's braking capabilities. Every piece of data confirmed what he already knew. The stop was impossible. But perhaps more significantly, Carlos found himself changed by his investigation. The man who had always found comfort in the predictability of mathematical equations was now confronting the possibility that the universe contained mysteries beyond human comprehension. "I've spent my whole career believing that everything could be calculated, that every problem had a rational solution," he told Patricia. "But this has shown me that maybe there are forces at work in our world that can't be measured with instruments or explained with formulas." His faith, dormant since childhood, began to reawaken as he grappled with evidence of something greater than the physical laws he had always trusted to govern reality. Rachel Thompson was an investigative journalist for the Arizona Republic who specialized in exposing fraud and debunking false claims. When her editor assigned her to look into the miracle on Central Avenue, she approached the story with professional skepticism and a determination to uncover the rational explanation that everyone else had missed. Rachel spent 2 weeks conducting exhaustive interviews with everyone connected to the incident. She spoke with witnesses, examined police reports, consulted with automotive experts, and even hired a private investigator to research the backgrounds of everyone involved, looking for any evidence of a hoax or conspiracy. What she discovered frustrated her journalistic instincts. Every witness told the same story. Every expert confirmed that the truck stop was physically impossible. Every piece of evidence supported the claim that something extraordinary had occurred that defied natural explanation. Most troubling for Rachel was her interview with Mike Gonzalez, the truck driver. She had expected to find inconsistencies in his account, signs of deception, or evidence that he was somehow complicit in staging the event. Instead, she found a man whose life had been genuinely transformed by an experience he couldn't understand but couldn't deny. "I went into this investigation expecting to write an exposé about mass hysteria and media manipulation," Rachel told her editor. "But I can't find any evidence of fraud. Every angle I've pursued has led to the same conclusion. Something happened that day that shouldn't have been possible." Rachel's article, published 3 weeks later, was titled, "The Miracle I Couldn't Debunk." It was the most difficult piece she had ever written, forcing her to acknowledge that some events might exist beyond the reach of investigative journalism to explain or dismiss. The article sparked national attention and brought Sarah's story to a much wider audience. Within days of Rachel Thompson's article appearing in newspapers across the country, Central Avenue and 3rd Street became an unlikely pilgrimage destination. People arrived from other states, drawn by the story of impossible rescue and divine intervention. Sarah was amazed by the diversity of visitors who came to see Miracle Corner. There were elderly couples who drove from New Mexico, young families from California, individuals dealing with their own crises who hoped to find hope in the place where the impossible had occurred. Among the pilgrims was Robert Chen, a businessman from Seattle who had been battling depression since his wife's death from cancer 6 months earlier. He had read about Sarah's experience online and felt compelled to visit the intersection where she had been saved. "I don't know why I came here," Robert told Sarah when they met at the memorial site. "I'm not even religious. But when I read your story, something inside me stirred for the first time since Linda died. I guess I needed to believe that there's still magic in the world, that death doesn't always win." There was Maria Santos, a mother from El Paso whose teenage son was fighting leukemia. She brought a photo of her boy and placed it among the flowers at the intersection, praying for her own miracle. "If God could stop a truck to save you," she whispered, "maybe he can stop cancer to save my Miguel." Each visitor brought their own story of need, their own hope for intervention, their own desire to connect with something greater than their circumstances. Sarah found herself becoming an informal counselor, listening to their struggles and sharing what she had learned about faith, hope, and the mysterious ways that help could arrive when least expected. The intersection had become more than a memorial. Dr. Harrison couldn't sleep that night. The image of Emma's perfect spine haunted him, not because it was disturbing, but because it was impossible. He'd spent 30 years in orthopedic surgery, had seen thousands of x-rays, performed countless procedures. Spinal curvatures like Emma's didn't simply disappear. The next morning, he called in favors from colleagues across 3 states. Dr. Patricia Wong at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Michael Stevens at Mayo Clinic, Dr. Sarah Chen at Stanford Medical. Each one reviewed Emma's case files independently. Their responses were identical, medically impossible. "Tom," Dr. Wong called him personally, "I've run this past our entire orthopedic department. We've never seen anything like this. The bone density, the vertebral alignment, the complete absence of scar tissue where the curvature existed. It's as if she was born with a perfect spine." Dr. Stevens was more direct. "Either your equipment malfunctioned, or we're looking at something that challenges everything we understand about human anatomy." But Tom knew his equipment was flawless. He'd had it calibrated just weeks before Emma's first visit. The technicians were experienced, the images crystal clear. There was no equipment failure, no human error, no misdiagnosis. He pulled Emma's file again, studying every detail. The progression photos showed the gradual worsening over months, then the sudden, complete reversal. The timeline was undeniable. The change occurred exactly when Emma claimed to have experienced her spiritual encounter. As a man of science, Dr. Harrison found himself facing an impossible choice: accept that everything he'd learned about medicine was incomplete, or dismiss evidence that was sitting right in front of him. Word began to spread through the medical community, despite Dr. Harrison's attempts at discretion. Medical anomalies had a way of traveling through professional networks, whispered in hospital corridors, and discussed in private consultations. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a neurologist at the same hospital, approached Tom during lunch. "I heard about your scoliosis case. I need to tell you something similar happened in my department last month." She described a patient with advanced multiple sclerosis whose MRI showed complete remyelination of damaged nerve fibers, something that simply doesn't occur in MS patients. The patient claimed she'd been prayed for at some prayer meeting. Same timeline, same impossible recovery. Dr. James Wright from cardiology joined their conversation. "Are you talking about unexplained recoveries? Because I've got a case that's been keeping me up at night. Severe cardiomyopathy, ejection fraction of 15%. Patient was scheduled for a heart transplant. Came back a week later with the heart function of a 20-year-old athlete." The 3 doctors sat in stunned silence. Each case occurred within the past 2 months. Each involved patients who claimed to have experienced some form of spiritual intervention. Each defied medical explanation. "What are we supposed to do with this information?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. "Write it up for a medical journal? 3 cases of divine intervention in modern medicine? They'd laugh us out of the profession." Yet the evidence was undeniable. 3 separate departments, 3 impossible recoveries, 3 patients whose lives had been transformed in ways that medicine couldn't explain or replicate. The conversation that began as curiosity was becoming something much more profound. Dr. Harrison found himself researching something he'd never considered before: documented cases of unexplained medical recoveries. What he discovered challenged his fundamental worldview. The medical literature, while cautious in its language, contained hundreds of cases labeled as spontaneous remission or idiopathic recovery, cancers that disappeared overnight, paralyzed patients who suddenly walked, blind individuals who regained sight without medical intervention. Most troubling to his scientific mind was the pattern. Many of these cases involved patients who reported spiritual experiences, prayer, or what they described as divine encounters. The correlation was too frequent to ignore, yet too impossible to accept. He scheduled a meeting with Dr. Margaret Foster, the hospital's chief of staff, and a woman known for her analytical mind. He presented Emma's case along with the other recent anomalies discovered by his colleagues. Dr. Foster studied the files for over an hour without speaking. Finally, she looked up. "Tom, in 40 years of medicine, I've learned that the moment we think we understand everything about the human body, something comes along to humble us." She leaned back in her chair. "I've seen cases like this before. Not many, but enough to know they exist. The question isn't whether these recoveries happen. The evidence is clear that they do. The question is what we do with that knowledge. As scientists, we're trained to find natural explanations. But what happens when the natural explanations don't exist? Do we dismiss the evidence, or do we expand our understanding of what's possible?" Dr. Harrison left that meeting with more questions than answers, but with a growing certainty that Emma's recovery was part of something much larger than he'd initially realized. News of Emma's recovery had spread beyond the medical community. Pastor Williams found his small church suddenly filled with visitors, people who'd heard whispers of a miracle, desperate souls seeking their own impossible answers. Among them was Margaret Chen, a 62-year-old woman whose husband was dying of pancreatic cancer. She'd driven 4 hours after hearing about Emma's story from a friend of a friend. Her eyes held the same desperation Emma's had carried months earlier. "I know it sounds foolish," Margaret told Pastor Williams after the service, "but if God could heal that young woman's spine, maybe he could help my David too." Pastor Williams felt the weight of responsibility. He'd witnessed Emma's transformation, had no doubt about the reality of her healing, but he also understood the danger of creating false hope, of promising outcomes that might not come. "Mrs. Chen," he said gently, "I can't promise you what God will do for your husband. What I can promise is that we'll pray with you, we'll support you, and we'll trust that God's love for David is greater than we can imagine." The church began holding special prayer meetings, not healing services with grand promises, but quiet gatherings where people brought their impossible situations and laid them before God with honest, desperate faith. Emma attended these meetings, sharing her story when asked, but always emphasizing that her healing wasn't something she'd earned or achieved. It was, she said, simply grace, unmerited, unexpected, and transformational. The small church was becoming a beacon for those who'd exhausted medical options and were reaching towards something beyond human understanding. 6 months after her healing, Emma stood before a gathering of over 300 people. The small church couldn't accommodate the crowd, so they'd moved to the community center. Medical professionals, patients, clergy, and curious observers filled every seat. Dr. Harrison sat in the front row, Emma's complete medical file in his briefcase. He'd agreed to present the clinical evidence before Emma shared her personal account. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil, "I'm going to show you something that challenges everything I thought I knew about medicine." He displayed the X-rays on a large screen, the progressive curvature, then the perfect spine. The gasps from the audience were audible. "I've had these images reviewed by colleagues at the nation's top medical institutions. The consensus is unanimous. This recovery is medically impossible." When Emma took the stage, she didn't speak about miracles or divine intervention in grandiose terms. Instead, she shared the simple truth of her experience. "I was desperate," she said, "not just because of the pain, but because I felt forgotten by God. I'd prayed for years without any answer. That night, I wasn't even asking for healing anymore. I was just surrendering." She paused, looking across the crowd of faces, some hopeful, some skeptical, all searching. "I can't explain what happened to my spine in medical terms. I can only tell you that I encountered someone who saw my pain and chose to heal it." Her voice grew stronger. "But the real miracle wasn't the straightening of my spine. It was the restoration of my faith in a God who sees us in our darkest moments and loves us enough to intervene." The testimony sparked intense discussion throughout the community. Local news stations picked up the story, interviewing both Emma and Dr. Harrison. The response was polarized. Some dismissed it as elaborate fraud, others saw it as proof of divine intervention. Dr. Harrison found himself in an unexpected position. Colleagues questioned his credibility, suggesting he'd been somehow deceived or had misdiagnosed the original condition. Medical boards requested additional documentation. His reputation, built over 3 decades, was suddenly under scrutiny, yet he stood firm. "I understand the skepticism," he told a reporter. "If someone had presented this case to me 6 months ago, I would have demanded extensive verification. But I've verified it myself, multiple times with multiple experts. The evidence is irrefutable." Emma faced her own challenges. Some accused her of seeking attention or financial gain. Others treated her like a celebrity, expecting her to produce miracles on demand. She struggled with both the criticism and the unwanted attention. Pastor Williams provided guidance during this difficult period. "Emma, when God does something extraordinary in our lives, it often comes with extraordinary responsibility. People will project their hopes and fears onto your story. Your job isn't to carry their expectations, but to remain faithful to what actually happened." The church leadership decided to document everything carefully, not to prove anything to skeptics, but to maintain accuracy as the story spread. They interviewed witnesses, collected medical records, and created a factual timeline of events. Through it all, Emma maintained her simple testimony. She had been healed, she didn't understand why, and she was grateful beyond words. Dr. Harrison was invited to present Emma's case at the International Conference on Unexplained Medical Phenomena. The invitation came from Dr. Jeffrey Morrison, a Harvard researcher who studied anomalous healing cases. "Dr. Harrison," Morrison explained during their phone conversation, "there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that consciousness, spirituality, and physical healing are more connected than traditional medicine acknowledges. Your case could contribute significantly to our understanding." The conference brought together medical professionals, researchers, and scientists from around the world. Dr. Harrison's presentation was scheduled alongside cases of spontaneous cancer remission, unexplained neurological recoveries, and other medical anomalies. As he prepared his presentation, Dr. Harrison reflected on how much his perspective had changed. 6 months earlier, he would have dismissed such a conference as pseudoscience. Now, he was a featured speaker. The audience of physicians and researchers listened intently as he presented Emma's case. The X-rays, the timeline, the expert consultations, everything was documented with scientific rigor. During the question and answer session, a neurologist from Switzerland asked, "Dr. Harrison, how has this case affected your practice of medicine?" The question caught him off guard. He paused, considering his words carefully. "It's made me more humble," he finally answered. "I've realized that medicine, for all its advances, still has profound limitations. There are healing mechanisms we don't understand, forces we can't measure, and recoveries we can't explain." He looked across the room of fellow physicians. Perhaps our role isn't just to heal, but to remain open to healing that comes from sources beyond our current understanding. A year after her healing, Emma returned to Dr. Harrison's office for her routine follow-up. The X-rays showed her spine remained perfectly aligned. Her pain levels were 0. Her quality of life had been completely transformed, but the changes went far beyond the physical. Emma had enrolled in nursing school, feeling called to help others navigate medical crises with both practical care and spiritual support. She volunteered at the hospital, spending time with patients facing difficult diagnoses. "Dr. Harrison," she said during their appointment, "I've been thinking about something. Before my healing, I thought God's love was conditional, that I had to be good enough, faithful enough, deserving enough. But what happened to me had nothing to do with my worthiness." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I think that's the real miracle. Not just that my spine was healed, but that I learned God's love isn't something I have to earn. It's something I can receive, even in my darkest moments." Dr. Harrison nodded, understanding more than he would have a year earlier. His own faith, dormant for decades, had been quietly rekindling through Emma's case and the other unexplained recoveries he'd witnessed. "Emma," he said, "you've taught me something important too. Medicine can treat symptoms, repair damage, even extend life. But healing, real healing, sometimes requires something beyond what we can provide in hospitals and clinics." As Emma left his office, Dr. Harrison reflected on the profound changes one impossible case had brought to his life, his practice, and his understanding of what it means to be truly healed. Emma's story continued to ripple outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. Margaret Chen, the woman whose husband had pancreatic cancer, had joined the church's prayer group. While David's cancer hadn't been miraculously healed, something else had happened. Their family had found peace, strength, and a community of support that sustained them through his final months. Emma's story didn't give us the miracle we wanted, Margaret shared during one prayer meeting, but it gave us something we needed: hope that God sees our pain and walks with us through it. Dr. Rodriguez, the neurologist who had her own unexplained case, started a monthly discussion group for medical professionals who'd encountered anomalous healings. The group met quietly, away from institutional scrutiny, providing a safe space for doctors to discuss cases that challenged their scientific worldview. Pastor Williams found his ministry transformed. The small church had grown, but more importantly, it had developed a reputation as a place where people could bring their impossible situations without judgment or false promises. They offered prayer, support, and honest acknowledgement that healing doesn't always come in the ways we expect. Emma herself had become more selective about sharing her story. She'd learned to distinguish between genuine seekers and those looking for sensational entertainment. When she did speak, she emphasized that her healing was a gift, not a formula; grace, not a guarantee. The medical community remained divided. Some embraced the mystery, acknowledging the limitations of current understanding. Others dismissed such cases as misdiagnosis or fraud. But the conversation had begun, and it was changing how some practitioners approached the intersection of faith and healing. 2 years after her healing, Emma was asked to speak at a medical ethics conference about the patient perspective on unexplained recovery. She stood before an audience of doctors, ethicists, and researchers, sharing insights that had emerged from her experience. "When I was sick," she began, "I wanted my doctors to have all the answers. I thought that's what medical expertise meant: complete understanding and control. My healing taught me something different." She looked across the room of medical professionals. The most healing thing Dr. Harrison ever did wasn't ordering tests or recommending treatments. It was sitting with me in uncertainty, acknowledging what he didn't know, and remaining present in the mystery of my condition. Her words resonated with many in the audience who had faced their own cases of medical uncertainty. As patients, we don't always need you to have answers. Sometimes we need you to be honest about the limits of medicine while still offering hope and care. Dr. Harrison, now in his early 60s, had become something of an advocate for what he called humble medicine, practicing with scientific rigor while remaining open to possibilities beyond current understanding. "Emma's case taught me that being a good doctor doesn't mean having all the answers," he told colleagues. "It means being present with patients in their suffering, doing everything within our power to help, and remaining humble about the mysteries we haven't yet solved." The conference concluded with a panel discussion about integrating spiritual care into medical practice, not as alternative medicine, but as recognition that healing involves the whole person: body, mind, and spirit. Emma's impossible recovery had become a catalyst for broader conversations about the nature of healing itself. 5 years have passed since that desperate night when Emma cried out to a God she thought had forgotten her. Her spine remains perfectly straight, her pain completely gone. But the real transformation extends far beyond her physical healing. She graduated from nursing school and now works in the same hospital where Dr. Harrison practices. Patients often seek her out, drawn by her unique combination of medical knowledge and spiritual insight. She doesn't promise miracles, but she offers something equally valuable: the assurance that they're not alone in their suffering. Dr. Harrison, now nearing retirement, has documented over a dozen cases of unexplained medical recovery during his career. He's become a respected voice in the growing field of integrative medicine, advocating for approaches that honor both scientific rigor and spiritual mystery. The small church where Emma first experienced healing has become a model for other congregations. They've learned to hold space for both miraculous intervention and faithful endurance, understanding that God's presence is constant even when dramatic healing doesn't occur. Emma often reflects on the intercessor's prophecy: "Today, the hand you cannot see will hold you." She's come to understand that the invisible hand doesn't just intervene in moments of crisis. It holds us constantly, in sickness and health, in answered prayers and continued struggles. Her story reminds us that the impossible isn't just the terrain where God works. It's where faith is born, hope is renewed, and the limitations of human understanding give way to something infinitely greater. If Emma's story has touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need to hear that the impossible is simply God's invitation to witness His power. Like this video if you believe in miracles, and subscribe for more stories of faith overcoming the impossible. Comment below and tell us about a time when you experienced God's hand in your own impossible situation. The hand you cannot see is holding you too.